Now, let's get into the papers now, see what the headlines are across Nigeria this morning. And the coronavirus, especially on social media, is really high up there right now. I have in the studio broadcast journalist Ife Onyegbule is here, as well as chartered accountant and public affairs analyst Sheson Okunade. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank God it's Friday.
Yeah.
But we have coronavirus on the Friday morning.
Bad news.
From afar, you're still my friend.
And I'm all covered.
Oh, yes, exactly. This is the first place to start. So Sheson will have to go home and wear the long sleeve. All right, let's start from a Blueprint newspaper this morning. It says a 1.7 trillion naira intervention. NEC orders forensic audit of Disco's accounts and company's performance dismal. Governors saying this. That's from the Blueprint. Let's go to Daily Times now. Insurgents attacking Christians to trigger religious war. As the federal government is saying this, urges religious leaders not to allow insurgents divide Nigeria. All right, from there, let's go to News Direct. News Direct says Senate proposes stiffer sanctions for gas flaring from 2021 as Nigeria loses 217 billion naira annually. Okay, that's News Direct. And from there, let's go to Daily Trust, which is the last paper we're looking at right now. Nigeria, Saudi Arabia halt Umrah over coronavirus. And suspected cases in Nigeria test negative. And this was earlier, the earlier report about a few days ago that the suspected case in Nigeria tested negative. But we have a fresh case right now as at this morning. Iran suspends Friday prayers as VP tests positive. And even other government officials in Iran, and that story is being reported across the world right now. Well, gentlemen, in the press there is no ladies, so let's. But the point there is, Nigeria has been talking about coronavirus. This issue has been analyzed over and over again, and if you settle even on your show, you talked about the issue of how prepared Nigeria is when it comes to, or the proactive measures from the ministries and all of that. But here we are recording the first case of coronavirus, although it's not a Nigerian, but as an Italian who visited Nigeria. Sheson, let me start with you on this. How scary do you think everything is? We were preparing, everybody was, on high alert, but here it is.
Mike, there is nothing as seeing the reality. There's a difference between preparation and having reality beholding you. Now we've seen the first case in Nigeria, and every of our preparation is going to be put to test if we are able to curtail this. But be it as it may, we've had some certain precautions before the advent of this in Lagos. And the encouragement we want to give to people is to take caution. One, minimize that attitude of hugging and shaking.
Hey.
Let's go the usual way of distance greeting. Two, the hygiene. Let's maintain it. During the time of Ebola, we have these sanitizers around. Most corporate organizations have it at their entrance.
I think that has to come back now.
It's coming back.
Yeah.
That's a business space for some people who make good sales of hand sanitizers. Yeah. And also, the disheartening thing in this part of the world is that we don't go to hospital. We prevail and do self-medication. But as we speak, I want to encourage, we need to just announce. It's not about you now. If you observe that somebody is really not feeling fine around you, you raise the alert. Okay. Because an average Nigerian wants to, you have any little symptom of saying, oh no, let me just take some rest and I'll be fine. And it might just be beyond that. Yeah. So, situation where people stay at home, let's report ourselves. Right. This is not an issue where we need to keep it because the spread of this thing, Mike.
All right. Well, the government is saying, the authorities are saying there's nothing to panic. Everyone should just, go
about your
but just be cautious. That's it. Now, if this guy Italian came into Nigeria on the 25th and was normal. No symptom, nothing. He went through the process and nothing was found out. Then the very next day, which was 26th, he fell ill. But the good thing there is he reported himself and took himself for a check. And they discovered that it was the virus.
Well,
and now he's at the infectious disease.
That's a very
Isolation
sincere
Center.
individual. Sheson just
different from
yes.
from Soya.
Soya, who wanted to run
case.
away until the woman had to,
Ededefo.
had to hold him down and all of that. Sheson just said something now. Not many Nigerians, when they come down with symptoms, would want to go report themselves to say, check me out. And that's what I think we need to begin to talk about now. If this Italian can say, look, I don't want to jeopardize the lives of millions of Nigerians. This is how I feel. He gave himself up and went to do that check. But as he has said, we need to cut down on all this hugging and pecking and all of that. Even couples, you don't know where your husband has been. You don't know where your wife has been.
Hey.
All the kissing and all of that.
So are you saying it shouldn't be? Is that what you're recommending now?
You can be intimate, but what I'm saying is you have to agree to say
on how intimate you can be.
Or, no, or when you've been. You need to tell your husband where you've been. Tell your wife where you've been. But be that as it may, I think Lagos should be, very aware now. They need to be on the alert with what it is that's going on.
All right. Now, Sheson, the point there is, the Minister of Health, Dr. Hadiri, at the time was recommending that people should self-quarantine if you discover that you have a certain feeling. You should self-quarantine first and then you report. Is that what you recommend for?
Yeah, from the health perspective, that's what they were saying. Okay. But my problem is, what is the orientation of an average Nigerian? There's one thing for you to pass out an instruction. Yeah. There's one thing for people to follow it to letter. They look at some of the ailments we've been fighting before now. Average Nigerian, we like stigmatizing people. And because of that, it has become a norm and culture to keep ourselves away when it happens. Remember the days of AIDS, even where you can manage things. People will prefer to just stay on their own and keep it and possibly transmit whatever they want. So because of the stigmatization that people do experience, it's pretty difficult to say, let me keep myself away from it. Just like what if he said, if you have to open up to say, I was somewhere yesterday that they said they detected the state, the husband himself might start giving problem to the wife. So the woman just keep it. And we have to keep our homes. Yeah. So the fact remains that our initial understanding we need to orientate our people to come out. An average European and all those guys, they value, not about you, but value other people.
When you talk about self-quarantine, I'm wondering what that is. Where are you going to quarantine yourself? In the same home where you have your wife and children, or where you have your husband and children?
No, you stay in the bedroom and I'll
you stay in the other room and sorry, in the bedroom.
And use your phone.
Exactly. And the Lagos State has released emergency lines, and certainly will be flagging that for people to know, so that we can spread it. If you have any kind of illness or feeling that you don't understand, call the lines, and then they certainly will come for you one way or the other, or tell you what to do and where to go. And one other thing is, ensuring you have long sleeves and washing your hands regularly with soap. And then another thing there is, sneezing and coughing that a lot of people do into their hands. It is advised to do it into your elbow.
As if you are
exactly, and all of that.
Can you imagine what will happen?
So we start dabbing when we want to
people go to eateries and you're touching the feel and all of
something
that.
else. But we have to leave it here now. Ifeanyi, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sheson Kwade, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
It's time to take a look at stories making the headlines in Nigerian newspapers. I have with me in the studio broadcast journalist Ifeanyi and chartered accountant and public affairs analyst Sheson Okwade. Good morning.
Good morning.
Gentlemen of the press. All right, thank you for joining us this morning. Let's quickly look at the stories making the headlines before we shift our focus to the coronavirus outbreak. Nigeria recording its first case. And I begin with the blueprint. 1.7 trillion naira intervention, NEC orders forensic audit of Disco's accounts. Company's performance dismal governors. To the Daily Times now, insurgents attacking Christians to trigger religious war. Federal government urges religious leaders not to allow insurgents divide Nigeria. To the front page of the News Direct, Senate proposes stiffer sanctions for gas flaring from 2021 as Nigeria loses 217 billion naira annually. And on the front page of the Daily Trust, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia halt Umrah over coronavirus. Suspected cases in Nigeria test negative. Well, we have a new case testing positive now. Iran suspends Friday prayers as VP tests positive. And finally, on the front page of the Vanguard, Nigeria at risk of coronavirus. NEC, federal government not doing enough. Senate asks the federal government to quarantine travelers from China. Oil prices drops $5 below 2020 budget benchmark. All right, let's look at the story. We have an outbreak already of a coronavirus a case rather testing positive, and some have said that perhaps if we had put measures in place to say that countries where we had this outbreak, we barred them from coming into Nigeria, perhaps this could have been avoided. I'll start with you, Sheson.
Yeah, you know, most of the time we don't balance things. Epidemic like this, you see countries cutting off ties for a certain period of time. But most of the time we look at the economic benefits, not considering the other side of it. We say, why do we want to stop that? It's going to affect our economy. But have you put into consideration, if you continue such alliance and this epidemic, which we've seen that has broke out, the impact of that on your economic itself? As we look at it now, we've heard several organizations, several countries are now going to be doing meetings, you know, virtually, and in this part of this world, we don't have that facility yet. So most of the meetings, we have it, you know, on site, physically. But with this advent of this, are we going to do those things? It's going to impact on our economy. Because if we have cut the tie, we only can look at one of the others. Even the NAS are saying they should minimize people that comes from China. Yeah. Is it only China? China has been able to manage it.
We have about 50 countries
over 50
that have been
countries.
affected.
So, and I'm not so concerned about people that are flying from other countries. Our land borders are porous. People have traveled and they will come in through our land porous and enter. And like I do tell people, this part of the world, we don't voluntarily give ourselves for examination. We are best at self-medication in all the things that we do. A lot of persons
are afraid because of stigmatization.
That is because our culture encourages that stigmatization. So you discover that people that comes in, look at the case of the man that was sister. When he came in on the 25th, he tested negative. The next day, he felt ill and he, you know, presented himself, and we discovered that that has happened. How many of such people do we know in our neighboring countries where our land borders are porous that will work thing and, you know, transfer this thing to the less privileged people that does not even have that strong immunity against some of these things? So I feel federal government should not just concentrate on saying people that are flying in. We should guide our land borders too and other areas, because people move in not only through the airspace, they're moving through the land, and it's happening. If we can move in that space in the developed world, how much more Africa? People coming through our borders, and all other things, and you don't even know where they're coming from. Some people will fly in to the neighboring country to do their business and just pass into Nigeria and come back. The guy will just deposit the thing and he goes back.
All right, if we quickly, some persons have said that with the way we were able to handle or tackle Ebola, that, you know, they're confident that with this case we can easily contain it. Confident? I wonder if you are that confident,
Well, that word, you know, piqued my interest as it is. I wonder where they're gaining that confidence from. Remember when it was...
Because of our experience with Ebola.
With Ebola. Yeah. Now you look at it, the government we had in place at that time is different from what it is that you have today. And I don't want to go into specifics. But what I'm saying is, now we've talked about this. This has happened in Lagos. The Lagos state governor needs to wake up and say, look, this is a challenge that we must all fight. They need to begin to create some kind of awareness. All of the awareness that you can think of, radio, television, go to the locals, go to the parks. Do you see how people get jam-packed on buses? Do you see what happens on the BRT
religious
buses?
Centers as well.
You know, religious centers, shopping malls and all of that. We need all of those places to have this what do I call it now? Is it a public address system so that these things are in the faces
and
of
even
people
schools.
and in their ears? If your children will have to stay home without going to school, why not? But we truly need to be careful, because I'm asking the question. The man didn't charter a flight from wherever he was coming from.
Absolutely.
He was right there with some persons on that flight. He probably sat down with people right there on the flight. He shook hands with people. He spoke to people. He didn't show any signs on the 25th when he came in. On the 26th, he took ill. How many persons do we know have taken ill now? As Sheson said, we don't just wake up one morning and say, please get me tested, I'm not feeling well.
So what would be proactive measures on your own part? So quickly.
Yeah, the proactive measure is, as he said, if you find that there's something wrong with you, don't go the way of saying, look, someone gave it to me, I have to give it to someone else. Just present yourself, get me tested. I don't know what it is that's going on in my body. And I think it's a good one. But the one that government is talking about, self-quarantine, it's never going to work. How do you quarantine yourself in a place where you share a room with your wife and 4 children? It's not going to be possible. So I think government needs to do more so that people can understand what it is that's before them.
All right, we have to leave it here now. Thank you so much, Ifeanyi Onyegule. Thank you, Sheson Okwande, for speaking with us.
Thank you.
Let's head into the papers now, see what the headlines are. And I have in the studio broadcast journalist Ifeanyi Onyegule, as well as chartered accountant and public affairs analyst Sheson Okwande. It's nice to have you both in the studio this morning. And the biggest talk in town right now is the issue of coronavirus or COVID-19, as it is coded. All right, but let's see what the headlines on the papers are. And we'll come back to this shortly. Let's start from Blueprint newspaper that says 1.7 trillion naira intervention. NEC, National Executive Committee, orders forensic audit of Disco's accounts and company's performance dismal. Some governors are saying this. All right, from the Blueprint, let's go to the Daily Times, and says insurgents attacking Christians to trigger religious war. The federal government is saying this, urges religious leaders not to allow insurgents divide Nigeria. Okay, from there, let's go to News Direct that says Senate proposes stiffer sanctions for gas flaring from 2021 as Nigeria loses 217 billion naira annually. Daily Trust is next now, and it says Nigeria, Saudi Arabia halt Umrah over coronavirus. Suspected cases in Nigeria test negative. This was certainly previously happened before the case right now that we're talking about. Iran suspends Friday prayers as VP tests positive alongside some government officials in that country. Daily Trust. From there, let's go to the Vanguard. Nigeria at risk of coronavirus. The National Executive Committee was raising this alarm, but certainly we have one now. Federal government not doing enough. The Senate is saying this and asks federal government to quarantine travelers from China. Oil price drops $5 below 2020 budget benchmark. You have all that on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper. And then the Nation newspaper is next now, and it says it's focusing on power crisis. Government launches forensic inquiry into discos, and governors seek briefing on the $5.8 billion Mambila power project. That is what you see on the front page of the Nation newspaper. Now, we're continuing with our talk on the coronavirus. Nigeria has recorded its first case with an Italian who returned from Milan and, came down with the symptom. But the federal government is saying there's nothing to panic, there's nothing to worry about. He's under surveillance, he's been quarantined, but certainly everything is under control as it is right now. We remember the days of Ebola. Let me start with you on this. Remember the days of Ebola where everyone went to get hand sanitizers, and then if you check the schools, primary, nursery schools, when you get to the gates of the school, all children were told to wash their hands before, which was a beautiful thing. Would you see us going back to that time now?
But of course, I know that there are some schools that didn't stop with the idea of the hand washing.
And hand sanitizers.
Yes, and the sanitizers. As I speak to you, even in my estate, every block, you have this sanitizer that is stuck to the wall. Before you get in, you just use it.
Does it have the content?
It
or
has
it's just
it. It has it there. I live in a very touche estate.
Oh, okay? Yeah. Is it you were talking about?
You know, before you get in, you have to take some of it and clean your hand. But let's look at the children in school. You know, children, they will always play. They will cough, they will sneeze and all of that. I think attention should be focused on the schools now. If you don't have the taps, you need to set up those taps. We could even do with the tippy taps that the United Nations, you know, sets up in some schools across Africa. Tippy taps where you have, you know, water containers, and there's a way the children will touch their legs on something and the water comes out so that they don't even touch the containers. But as we talk, I'm also looking at companies that, you know, make soap and sanitizers and all of that. They need to partner with these schools so that they will supply them with the products so that these schools can have it and these children can stay as safe as they can. Okay. But again, if children begin to come down with those symptoms, I would say that parents should find a way to keep them off school. Don't say because your child is looking ill, you want to push that child to school so that other children can get infected. You know what it is about immunity with children? It's still very low, and they're susceptible to catching it.
The consciousness should be, in fact, we had a doctor earlier on who was saying that the religious gatherings right now should be very conscious of this, because we're very used to, we pray for everything, and then by the grace of God, we move on.
I still maintain, sorry, before you go to Sheson, all those people who are always used to kissing and pecking and all of that.
Can somebody give me water now?
They need to be careful.
All right, so intimacy. Sheson, the point is, there's also the advice of using the mask. You know, in case someone has cough and then is constantly sneezing. How much of that should one consider right now?
It's one of the things that they put in place that we need to take caution. Also, at this point, I want every organization to now, possibly, I don't know how they are going to designate someone, you know, you can contact this thing through touching and all those things. Now, every security guard at the entrance of every place must be on guard. He should be the only one to open and close every door. So you don't get there and you want to open the door because anything can happen. So you just get the guy there, he opens, he closes.
Everyone should also check railings.
You know, railings, staircase. Some people they're fond of it. Even when they paste there, do not touch the wall. They just want to slide their ends on the rail. It's about you taking caution now. It's not about you alone. Remember, once you have it, you have a family, you have people that are very close to you. Just take caution, and I'm sure with faith and every other thing.
Have we talked about using utensils?
That's a Nigerian thing. Now, there was a video that went viral that some persons in China, 1 or 2 persons in China, the video, you know, at the elevators, they deliberately were trying to, you know, spread whatever they had. And we saw in the video a man in China, you know, spitting into the hand and then rubbing on the buttons. It still
goes to that
in
aspect of saying
so
that
one should really
in
be
the
very
elevator,
careful.
put someone there. That all he does is that when you get the which floor you go, he's the only one that touch and do everything, and he can monitor the inflow of people that come.
Okay, because there can be some mischievous people out there as well.
So every organization must take this into
Thank
consideration.
you so much, Sheson Kwade, for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me.
If he has recommended that intimacy should be, you know,
I don't understand how if he's going to manage that.
No problem. If you, thank you very much for coming. Thank you. All right.